Are you ready to get fired up? Because I sure am. I've got Liz Faircloth with me, and she is actually has her own podcast and has written a book. I'm going to tell you all about her. So if you're interested in anything entrepreneurial, you are absolutely in the right place. Hi, Liz. Welcome.
Hi, Krista. So excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me on your show. Really appreciate it.
Oh, so you have your own podcast. Tell us a little bit about you. I always like people to do their own kind of introductions. And I know sometimes it's kind of like you're afraid to brag, but I want you to, this is your bragging session. You get to brag about all your great accomplishments.
Do some bragging. Where do I begin? When I was 2 years old. No, I won't go back that far. Professionally, I went to school to be a psychologist, got my master's degree in social work. So I really wanted to open my own practice. And during my social work experience, my brother-in-law, who's the only entrepreneur I ever met or knew not growing up, but even in my life, he'd started dating my sister. And he said, you got to read this book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I like personal growth books. I was always like my early 20s, I was reading Awaken the Giant Within, like most 20-year-olds, right? And I say a lot of bad jokes, but he gave it to me and it really got me thinking about my trajectory in my life. And although I loved helping people, and I think I'm still a social worker by background, I'm like, maybe I really like this thing called passive income. How do I get that? And being a bit naive, I started taking courses. My then boyfriend and I started taking courses at the local RIA meetings and started learning about investing, and had no one in our family, didn't have much, money to even invest with. My dad loaned us $30,000 on our first duplex that we bought. That was 16 years ago. And so
you started young. Good for you.
Yeah. My husband and I, when we were meeting, I was a little too focused in some ways, Krista. I think I've relaxed over the years in some ways, but I was really focused on, him and I both wanted a bigger life. And we really wanted to contribute a lot. And we said, how can we do that? Well, we need to create some financial freedom for ourselves and not just work for others. And we got really clear on that early on. Now, our path wasn't so like, do this, do that, do that. Oh, you're financially free. That was not our path. It was a lot of twists and turns, a lot of, tough decisions and, mistakes along the way. But we both had that yearning early on. And then we basically built our business on multifamily, and we buy larger buildings. So we have about 60 million under management, and we are partners with a lot of people. We raise money to buy larger buildings, but we've over 200 investors now we work with, and we own buildings in 4 states. And so we have a lot of different experience, but we've kind of went all in on that about 8 years ago. Then along the way, met my now partner as well, Andressa. Her and I and the two couples were partnering together, doing flips, doing a bunch of different things in real estate. And we'd always get together, Krista, and say, where are the other women in this business? Because it can get a little lonely. So long story short, I met her about 6 years ago, and we started partnering. And about 3 years ago, we said, let's really focus on supporting women and empowering women in this business. And we started the podcast called the Estate InvestHer Show, which is now published by Bigger Pockets, which is got the #1 real estate investing podcast in the world. And that grew into other things, from a membership to, doing a lot of different things to serve women. I'm still an active investor, but my heart and passion is really serving women and helping them build their wealth, so we never have to rely on anyone else.
Yeah. So just, it's the Real Estate Invest, and it ends HER, HER. So the Real Estate Invest HER, HER, in case you're wanting to listen to her podcast. I was actually on it. We had a great time with it. And you also wrote the book, right? The Woman in the Room.
Yeah. So we just published a book called The Only Woman in the Room. And it's 20 stories of women from different walks of life, different challenges they've had to work through. Some women focus on single family, some focused on multifamily, but a lot of them went through a lot of really tough things. Mm-hmm. And so they share their journey, and they share kind of how, not just the tactics, right? Because we can all learn how to flip a house or buy a rental property, but it's the journey, right? It's the journey, understanding how women prevailed, so to speak, over some really, really tough things, and so it kind of highlights 20 women in the investing world and their stories. And that kind of launched our publishing arm. So we're going to be publishing a book one book a year. And the goal is to give women a voice, and from a women's perspective, and shine a light on their journey and speaking about something when it comes to investing.
That's a lot of work. That's a big goal you have.
I know. I've got a lot of goals, but
I've written 4, and I'm just like, oh my gosh. I told my husband, "Have I written a book?" And he's like, "What? You're gonna be up at 3 a.m. typing again?" You know, it's like he looks over. I'm like, "Sorry, babe." So, for somebody that's maybe listening, obviously we have a lot of real estate agents and a lot of people in the real estate industry that are here. What are some tips and tricks you can give them when dealing with investors because I remember when I was selling real estate, and if somebody would call and it was an investor, I would be like so turned off by it because they always wanted these amazing good deals, and it was like all this work, and it wasn't even worth my time to do it, so I would never take them. Is there any advice or feedback you have on that?
Yeah, it's interesting because we talk on the other side to investors how to find investor-friendly agents, right? And it is a dance a little bit because some of the agents are like, I don't want to get wasted. To your point, I don't want to get my time wasted by people who want things cheaply, because a lot of investors want a deal. And on the other hand, the investor doesn't really want the agent who doesn't really know, can't serve them the way they need to be served.
Yeah.
So it's a kind
I totally
of
get it. It's like for both ways,
Yeah. I think that connection could be really powerful because number one, where I think the advantage of actually working with investors is that they're repeat customers. If they're serious investors, they could be repeat customers. So you're really developing. And if you help them in a market that's growing, they're going to tell all their investor friends.
Yeah.
So that one client can really become like an exponential referral agent to you. So I see the benefit of looking for now, having said that, a lot of investors will call agents, and the way to vet like an investor, like, is this someone I could take seriously? If you ask them, if the agent asks them, what's your buying criteria? And they don't know how to answer that, or they're like, well, I'm looking for a good deal. I'm looking in a few different markets, these 7 markets, I'm looking for a single family, multifamily, self-storage facility, whatever works. Like those are all really bad signs. So the more focused and the more, they're really clear on their criteria, the more serious they're going to be, and they're not going to, kick tires.
So give me some examples of criteria.
Yeah. So I would say, how much are you looking to put to work? So what's your amount of money you want to actually spend, and or what type of value of property you're looking for. So I'm looking for a vacation rental, and I call an agent, which is something that, is one of my goals. We're very heavily in multifamily, but I really want to buy a vacation rental so I can selfishly use maybe once or twice a week, a year. So if I called them and they said, what's your buying criteria? I'd say, I really want to be close to an airport. I want to be close. I don't want to be in a major city. I want to be in like an area that's a little more drivable, drivable vacation areas, stable, close to like a park. I would love to have a vacation rental close to a park, close to a number of I don't want to say amusements, but things that people want to go to, that there's tons of people going to every year. The fourth would be the money part, would be to say, okay, I have about $100,000 to put to work between down payment and, repairs. Mm-hmm. So I'm really looking for a house that's probably 300,000, I would be my, comfort zone in terms of price tag, if you will, not so much value, because I'd love to buy something and then actually be valued at 400 or something. So, that undervalued property. So I think people who have a grasp of how much the property should be worth, or I'm sorry, how much you want to spend and the ARV, so to speak, and also just the other criteria. And sometimes you don't know all those things, but if at least you have some, because I don't know vacation rentals. So I can't say I want this return or because I'm learning, right? I know multi, but so for me to have like 19 things in an area that I don't know would be weird, but at least the generalities. Because now I've thought about the money part and I've thought about the implementation.
Now, what about, okay, that's awesome. Because I know these are kind of questions that agents are thinking, right? So, the kind of things that investors are thinking or worried about.
Yeah.
Now, what about somebody that's listening, and whether it be a man or a woman, obviously your client avatar is women, but they're nervous about investing because of the crash, right? We had the crash in, obviously, and some people, I heard the statistic that 60% of people who went through foreclosure have not re-entered the market. And which is crazy. It seems so high to me. But what about people that are afraid of the market crashing, or, them, something happening? There's a fear behind investing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you talk to friends and you talk to people, everyone's going to have an opinion. So my first recommendation is always be talking to like active investors, and are what are they doing? Are they buying? Are they selling? Are they, and I think that's something always good advice. Like if I wanted to start a business, am I going to talk to my uncle or aunt that's never started a business? I don't think so. I'm going to feel discouraged. So just watch the advice we get from people, even if they're in the real estate industry, if they're not actually active investors, I would just be mindful of that. But more importantly too, it's like, I often say, you always want to look at a market. What happened in 2008? So you have the COVID, pandemic, which was something none of us ever expected and even didn't have our heads around. Multifamily actually remained extremely, stable and actually grew. A lot of our portfolio grew during COVID, where people thought the opposite. So it has so much to do with the market, right? It has so much to do. If it was struggling before COVID, we were going to have challenges during COVID, obviously. People not paying their rent, depending on where the building's located, all the different things happening. So, but I'm always a big fan of looking at what happened. If I'm looking at a particular market, say I'm looking at Alabama or, wherever, I want to look at what happened in that market during the last crash. Like what really happened in that particular market. Some markets kind of stayed the same, stable. Some took a really big dip. Some maybe grew steadily. We were looking at a development in the town I actually live in, a little town called New Hope, Pennsylvania. And it actually not only stabilized, but actually went up like by 5% during the last crash. Wow. So it made us feel a lot more, okay, So I think, and this has been before COVID, when everyone kept talking about the crash coming, another crash coming. And we're like, that's real. We're going to be building new, townhomes. And there's so much talk in terms of economic, people in, economics, so to speak, saying that there's going to be a crash. But you do want to look at, every market's different. You know that best. So you want to know what happened in that market, and not just in that market, but with your particular asset class. So if it's single family homes versus multifamily, they're different, and there's a different result. So just be mindful of that, and actually look at the past to dictate some of the future. Because if it remains stable, then, and again, COVID has such a uniqueness to it, but if you can get a good price right now and you're not getting taken and not spending too much, then this is a great time. And that's just the thing you need to be mindful of, is know your price points, because you don't want to overspend, because I see that happening so much right now.
And plus you're in it for the long haul, right? So it's like, even when the crash hit, people that kept their properties and just paid off the mortgage, then they still have that asset. And now the property is gone, obviously back up if they're using it, to make it pencil.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's good. We crashed 75% in my area, 75%. It was insane, and as we both know, all of the reasons why the crash happened, those variables aren't happening anymore. All the reasons. People are always asking, when's the crash? I'm like, there's this TikTok video just is like, when's the crash? Could be 3 months. And they're like, oh, really? And it could be 6 months, could be 2 years. Like, it was just a super funny TikTok, because no one really knows. And it may never, I don't personally think it'll ever happen like it did before. It was just so bad, but that's a whole other podcast.
And I would say too, one of our biggest purchases to date, which is a 334 unit. And again, we do this with investors. We do this with a lot of other people. So by no means just me and my husband taking these projects down, but we bought it during COVID, and the first buyer, fell out. And just because, so when there's a lot of, I don't want to say like a lot of fear, but there's a lot of uncertainty, is sometimes the best times to buy, because you got to observe the masses and do the opposite. I mean, because most people are going, oh, I don't want to do that. And then meanwhile, there's so many opportunities to be had. If you're smart, if you're conservative, all those things.
It's so surprising how well it's done during COVID. I mean, there's just no inventory. So, I mean, gosh, we're selling properties for $100,000 over list price, and it's starting to kind of slow down and be a little bit more normal. Still under a month's amount of inventory. The absorption rate is under 1 month, so it still appears to be a super crazy seller's market. But people are getting nervous that it's not selling with 15 offers and 87 showings in the first hour.
Right. The bar has been increased, right?
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about like your journey and your path, and sort of, right now people look at you and they see you have your own podcast and you have all these rentals, and you're doing so well and you're leading these women. And talk a little bit about, the entrepreneurial journey, because I think people, they forget that, with every, hardship is an opportunity. Right.
Yeah.
And so we can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I'm going to just reverse engineer, when my husband and I decided to really focus on real estate, he ended up quitting his job. So it was right when we got married, and 2005. And so one of us needed to pay the bills and all those important things as adults, right? And so I took a consulting job in sales and consulting, and really just helping companies with their employees. And it was like team building, almost like, kind of management consulting, if you will. So I did that for over a decade as I helped my husband, and we worked in real estate. I was kind of the consultant on one hand, and he was, the full-time investor. So I learned how to like be a consultant, and moving from a consultant to an entrepreneur, full-time entrepreneur, was a really big transition for me. You think about as a consultant, the more you worked, the more clients I had, the more I traveled, the more money I made. Mm-hmm. So literally I traded my time for money to the T, right? And the whole point of becoming, an investor and an entrepreneur, and really moving from
not to have to do that.
Yeah, is the opposite. So I had to really look in the mirror and say, I really need to. And quite honestly, when I started working with my husband, I worked with him, and we knew that just long term, him and I day to day working together wasn't the best fit for our marriage, to be perfectly frank. I love him dearly, and I've always been involved.
I totally get it. I love my husband too, but I don't want to work with him.
Yeah, every day, day in and day out, So the last several years, I had my son, and I've been doing a lot of soul searching, and then coming together with Andressa, stepping into this, real leadership role, right? A real startup. We started this as a passion. We started this with a podcast, like if women, even wanted something like this, and it's proved to, okay, there's women who want and need different things, and we're here to serve them. So, it's really allowed me, it's quite honestly confronted me on where I need to grow. For example, even partnering with someone. You cannot, if you're partnering with anyone and it's for the long term, you have to look at yourself in the mirror.
Yeah.
What are your
marriage?
It's
like a marriage. In fact, you sometimes spend more time with your partner than you do with your husband.
And so like, I realized things about myself where, how am I with more direct people? How am I with less direct people? Where am I quieter? Where do I need to step up and really speak my truth? Where do I second guess myself? And really kind of owning my own power. I know that sounds really like, wow, didn't you figure that out 15 years ago? But I think as we evolve, I've really in the last several months have come to like some peace and some constant, like working on my own, like emotional health. Mm-hmm. I work out. I've always worked out, I meditate, and I've, growing young children, and like, but I honestly, now I'm in my 40s. I'm like, mid 40s. I'm like, I gotta really work on myself as a leader. And what does that look like to Liz? Whether that means everyone's different. Some people have to speak up. Some people have to speak a little differently, and everyone has different things to work on. But myself as a leader is what I'm really constantly working on, and how I can adapt and shift and quite honestly own my own power. And I think a lot of women, especially women, I think, men, sure, I'm certainly, but I can only speak because I know I work with a lot of women, but owning our power is really important, especially for the role that we're in, versus like, I'm not an order taker. I'm not taking orders from anyone. We're literally creating things out of nothing, right? Yes. Totally different than me serving a company. So that's been a journey for me, and it's not over. And I do a lot of work on myself. I see a therapist, honestly, and I'm very open about that, because my mental health and my emotional health will only allow me to be a better servant to the women in our community. And I want to impact a lot of people. So I need to be a bigger person, and not a bigger person. I need to be a better version of myself. And I'm a great person. I kind of like myself, but there's days that I'm like, I need to work on this. I got to step up here. Come on.
Always though. We're always evolving and trying to be, it's never stopping, right? Like we're never going to be the best version of ourselves, because we're always trying to continue to do more. It's funny that a lot of things you say, we have so much in common, because I have a master's degree in industrial psychology. I was going to be a psychologist as well. And then I thought, I don't want to do this. Right. So I actually used to work in a pharmacy, and I dealt with people that would come in, and I was like, I don't want to deal with those kind of people on a daily basis. So I changed my career altogether and became a teacher. It's just funny to hear you. And I totally agree. For me, I'm constantly trying to work on leadership. And leadership, a year and a half ago, I had to really look in the mirror and say, Krista, you need to improve your leadership skills. I had 2 people leave my company, and I looked in the mirror and I said, you need to be a better leader. You're treating your team members like you're expecting too much out of them, and they have families and they have lives, and they're not you, and they don't work like you, and this isn't their company. And so my word for the year was refinement and leadership. And
Ooh.
I will tell you, by looking at myself and saying, you lost these people and this happened because of your own leadership, and really truly looking in the mirror and owning that I needed to improve, we have just completely just crushed the past year and a half during a worldwide pandemic. And it's because of the leadership. So I really, really appreciate that you say that, and that you say that it is a constant work. And gosh, I've been going to counselors forever, it's like, and I thought I'm embarrassed about it. It's like, we're human and we have problems. Yeah. I always tell people in my communities, like, hey, I'm a coach and I'm really great at inspiring and motivating and helping, but I'm also a human and I make mistakes. And sometimes I yell at my husband. I do things that I shouldn't to my kids. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like, it's called being human. And I love the fact that you're so open about that, because I think vulnerability and transparency is just so important. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what else would you like? I mean, I know we had a great conversation when I was on your podcast. Again, her podcast is the Real Estate InvestHer, HER, all one word. So you can look that up. And, just what are some of the things some of the episodes that you've recorded that you found people have gotten the most, like their most ahas?
That's a good question. It's funny because so many times in the podcast world, people, you're like, oh, this person has an amazing following, or they have a really, well-recognized name. But honestly, the episodes that resonate with a lot of women are where women of the we're interviewing get really real and vulnerable and just share about their journey. Because it's like anything, why we create what we did, in terms of a community, and why we want to see more women keynoting at conferences, which is really important to us, versus them being on a panel, just annoys me. I want women to be keynoting, is because when we see someone like us, whatever that means to you, there's more possibility in us that gets kind of, to your amazing title of your podcast, gets fired up. But until you see that person, it was like Oprah Winfrey, right? Oprah Winfrey saw Barbara Walters when Oprah Winfrey was a young child, and she saw Barbara Walters interviewing someone else, which is a big deal, right? For women, to be that prominent on TV, and that created this spark in Oprah Winfrey, right? So what if that didn't happen? We wouldn't have Oprah Winfrey. So my point saying that is, I think the women that women can relate to, and that are just normal people that quite honestly deal with everything we all deal with, but have overcome those things and have created really amazing things in their life, I think really inspire other women. There was a woman, I'm thinking of Gertrude, on our podcast early on, and I love having a community. And it's a tip for anyone that wants to build something. We started a Facebook community at the same time we did a podcast, because think about a podcast, right? We're talking to people, but we wanted to be in conversation with people. So we started a Facebook community simultaneously. And there was a woman that applied to be in, just answer the few questions that we have for the Facebook group. And she said, oh, I bought 72 doors in 13 months. And I'm not even from this country. And I'm like, oh, wow. I got to interview her for the podcast, of course, And she's like, oh, that was my first podcast, and I'm so grateful for it. And in some ways, I like
72 properties in 13 months, man.
And she's the most humble, but strong lady, no question. Everyone has their strength in different ways, and she's great. She's from Boston. But anyway,
that's 6 homes a month that she purchased, man.
And she figured out how to do it, and just her ability to come to this country and then, she's not even from here, and then to be able to create that kind of wealth for her and her family, and is really inspiring. And that's the kind of things that I think we're all about, is like, it's not, this perfect thing. It's like a journey, and there's ups and downs, but people figure it out, and you can too, and this is how you can figure it out.
Authenticity is so true. It's just, people really appreciate just being authentic, especially now with all the social media that we have, and people are, just always trying to be so perfect. And I always try to impress that, like, let's be perfectly imperfect and just take action, just go and just be yourself, and you'll resonate with the right people, so
I want to follow you. Yeah.
It's super, 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 super powerful. So, gosh, so you teach people actually how to actually find the homes and the type of deals to get and what to look for and the type of return on investment. You teach them from A to Z, all of that in different states, because you're buying all over the place.
Yeah, we buy mostly on the East Coast, but the kind of community that we, Jess and I have built because we have meetups across the country. We want to develop a way that women online and offline can connect with each other and give and get. So we have over 50 meetups, literally for free, women can go to across the country. And there's just local circles of women coming together to support each other. And why people are like, and it's a safe space. And you know what I mean by that, where women don't always feel like they can ask the questions they want, not made feel like they're morons, or it's the old boys club, quite honestly. Yeah. And so
it amazes me still how much of that exists. It's just, there's still so much of it that I just spoke on the stage, and I was one of the few women. I can't tell you how many women were like, it was so nice to see you up there. There was hardly any women. And I was like, I noticed that too, but then certain people are really conscious of it and trying to, be. So I really appreciate that when it's not. I was on Russell Brunson's stage. She was very, very, aware of different ethnicities and female and male. It was just so great what he had done. It was really, really nice. But
just an example of that, like we have a property in North Carolina. Now, North Carolina is probably more the South. I'm from the Northeast.
Yes.
But regardless, we have an all-female team there, our property management team. And I'm not going to, all of our property managers are great. We work with a few, but this team is particularly all women. So the woman who runs the whole property is a woman. The property maintenance director, normally a man, is a woman, young woman. And then there's two guys that report to her. So it's very interesting. I was like, so I went down there, we were visiting and doing like a walkthrough. There's a lot of units being turned. And so I said, can I interview the maintenance director? I'd love to interview her. I got to interview her. I don't see that all the time. And it's just so awesome, So she was so cute. She's like, I'm a little nervous about this. She was so nervous.
Yeah.
So I said, tell me about your journey. Like, she like knows everything you want to know about HVAC. Like, I've never heard anyone talk about HVAC systems the way I've heard. And then meanwhile, I'm like, I don't understand HVAC systems.
Yeah.
And it's like, wah, wah. But she was so eloquent and knew what she was doing and so competent. I said, I didn't lead her here, but I said, how have the residents here received your leadership? I was just curious. I didn't know what that was going to turn into, but I was curious. She goes, a lot of them have totally welcomed me. They love me, and I'm very competent and my team's competent. I've gotten a few residents who have refused me to come into their apartment because I'm a woman, and they've told me that. They said, please don't come in. I will only see a man because a woman doesn't know much about maintenance.
Oh, gosh.
This was like a few months ago. This wasn't in 1970 versus 1960s. This was literally a few months ago. And she's like, I don't get it a lot, but it's a handful of residents here. And I said, wow. And when people say they don't see that or hear that anymore, and what's the purpose of even having a women's community? Is that even necessary? Yeah, it is. Because it's not about why we're so passionate what we do is that it's not about like circling all these women and then having women only talk to women only in the world. It's about building everyone's confidence, giving and getting, having a safe space so that they can work with wherever they want to work with whomever they want to work. But there's a level of confidence and camaraderie and support that you're getting that is really amazing. That's what it's about to me. It's not about like a secret society that women only work with women.
Yeah.
So,
oh my gosh. It's like, we just, I love men and women, but I have majority of my company is women, and it's not even, I don't mean it to be that way, it just tends to be. And so I'm trying to hire men, but at times, but women are this awesome workers, so I have to say.
Yes.
They really are. Okay, so I always end the podcast by just asking you, if you were to give any piece of advice, both whether it be personal or whether it be business, what would that advice be to people?
I would say never give up. I know that's very cliche, but there's been so many times I didn't even get into in this interview of, money, like a mini Bernie Madoff situation happening to us and our investors, where like that hundreds of thousands of dollars were still stolen from us, getting sued, like really tough things that are not pleasant things. And there's so many moments that you're like, these things happen and you constantly look at yourself and say, am I the right person to be doing this? And I think you are, first off, and two, you just can't give up and learn from it, and get up that next day and figure it out. Because there's a lot of people that need you. And so that's been a big learning for me, is just never give up. And that's the key to our success and all the ups and downs, especially my husband and I had early on in our business, because we had a lot of them.
Yeah. I love that you say that. I mean, that's so true. It is, it might sound cliche, but it's the truth, right? I mean, everyone experiences hardships, just a matter of how you go under, over, through, and around them and how you deal with them. Liz, thank you so much. I have just really enjoyed interviewing you, and I know that our listeners have. And I want to encourage you to go listen to Liz, the Real Estate InvestHer HER show on podcast. If you're listening to this will be really great. And thank you. And anything you want to leave us with?
No, thank you so much for having me, Krista. I hope with anything we do that we inspire one more woman to create financial freedom for themselves. So yeah, go for it. Take some steps. We have a lot of free resources, and we have some other neat resources in our membership, but we have a lot of free things that you could just jump into and start taking action.
Ooh, I love it. I love it. Okay, everyone, remember, listening is great. And I want to thank you so much for your time. It means the world to me that you gave us your time. So thank you for that. But implementation is key. Listening won't help. You got to actually take action. So thank you so much. And I hope you are just as fired up as I am. Bye, Liz.
Thank you, Krista.
Hey there, I have a brand new podcast called Fired Up with Krista Mashore, where I bring my high energy right to your ears. This podcast is available on all your favorite podcast platforms. So do me a favor, go subscribe and leave a review. All this information is free, and I cannot wait to teach you everything I know. Thanks so much for watching my video. You can learn more about how to be a successful real estate professional by watching other videos that I have. And be sure to subscribe to my channel. And as always, make it a great home selling and buying day.